giant strategy took full effect in Zeeland, the region devastated by the storm of 1953. Seen from the sky, it looks like lace. The water is everywhere. To defend themselves against it, the Dutch erected some impressive dams. In 1979, a huge construction of earth and steel was created. The Oosterschedelkering, or the Eastern Scheldt storm surge barrier, was the first superstructure to be built after the storm of 1953. It took 26 years for this unprecedented technological innovation to see the light of day. This 9-kilometer-long barrage, located between two islands, has 62 steel sliding doors, each weighing 480 tons. These 62 barriers, which separate the North Sea from the Eastern Scheldt River, have come down 27 times since the barrier went into operation. Each of the doors weighs the same as 15 heavy trucks, and they are lowered as soon as the swell exceeds 3 meters. On 27 occasions, they have fended off coastal surges like that seen in 1953.
It has protected our country from floods from the sea already for 2 generations. And so it will remain a very essential part of our flood defense strategy.
Once the south of the country was secured, this extraordinary plan to protect the country then turned to Amsterdam's big sister, Rotterdam, the country's economic capital. The biggest port in Europe, 80% of the city of Rotterdam is located below sea level. Rotterdam may have made its fortune from water, but at the same time, it risks perishing from it too. In the north and in the south, everywhere the water could come in had to be blocked to prevent flooding. The rivers are the enemy to be fought. And the first defense is the Haringvliet, a spectacular construction that regulates the waters of the Meuse and the Rhine, the 2 rivers that flow through Rotterdam. As soon as the water level gets too high and threatens to flood the city, the 17 openings in this dam are activated and the river water is dispatched into the North Sea. This 5-kilometer-long dam also serves as a 4-lane motorway.
The budget given over to this project and the money still granted to maintain it are quite phenomenal.
Since its implementation, the Delta Plan has served as a military strategy, constantly pushing the technological limits. And its centerpiece is the most prodigious superstructure ever seen in the world. The Maeslantkering, built in the 1990s. Its purpose is to protect the city from storms. Located at the entrance to the port of Rotterdam, this mobile dam protects more than 3.5 million inhabitants, along with the commercial activity of the 8th largest port in the world. This hydraulic structure was completed in 1997 and is the largest mobile structure in the world at 420 meters long, the equivalent to the length of 4 soccer fields end to end, and 20 meters high. Its designers have planned for all eventualities. To prevent such a system from breaking in the event of a major storm, they left a slight opening between the doors when they close. This breach prevents the dam from breaking when water flows in hard and fast.
So about 3 meters or 3 meters 50 above the mean sea level, and a storm surge with a certain force, wind force 11 or 12, then it is decided to close the dam.
Twice, this unrivaled example of technological prowess has proven its effectiveness. During the storm of November 2007, and the North Sea storm in January 2018, water levels reached record levels. The authorities decided to close the dam and managed to avoid the worst.
For the people living over there at around 3.2 meters above sea level, it's very important for the dam to close in time to avoid their houses being flooded.
For Europe's largest port and the country's largest city, the daily challenge is to keep the threat as far away as possible. In order to ensure the greatest possible protection from the water, the Maeslantkering has a partner construction with which it works in tandem. The Hartelkering barrier is located a little further inland. It works like a guillotine and wasn't included in the Delta Plan. But since the 1990s, climate predictions have made it indispensable. This impressive 98-meter-long mobile dike is mounted on 3 pillars. Each of its doors is suspended at a height of 14 meters above the canal, comparable to a 5-story building. Since 1997, the closing system has been used twice, simultaneously with the Maeslantkering barrier.
But this is a very gradual process, and we monitor this very closely, how this will evolve, because safety first.
Today, the Netherlands seem to be fully protected by its anti-flood weaponry. Just like Amsterdam, it is permanently monitored to keep the threat at bay. But behind their incredible technological prowess, the Dutch live with danger every day.
They have profoundly transformed their territory, and it is very tightly controlled. The aim is to have total control over the entire system, which no longer has anything natural about it. As such, we're not looking at a natural disaster. Rather, we're looking at a system failure that is due to this vision of having total control over nature.
In this artificial country, nature is like a machine in which humans control every cog.
And living in a machine like Holland means that you have to upgrade your machine every 30, 40, 50 years. 50 years ago, we thought that we were finished for the next 500 years. And now we know that we have to upgrade it, that the levees that we have, the polders that we have, are not enough to keep Holland dry for the next century.
Innovation and ingenuity can never stop here because there are so many dangers facing the Netherlands. In addition to rising water levels, river floods and storms, another major problem that is nibbling away at the Netherlands is one of coastal erosion. This is one of the first consequences of rising sea levels. The dunes subside and then disappear, and the disappearance of these mountains of sand is endangering the land behind the coast. Indeed, the dunes are the first line of protection against high waters. They act as natural ramparts. Without them, flooding would be unavoidable. And the Dutch have come up with a unique kind of vessel to reinforce them, the zandmotor. The idea is simple. Sand is gathered from the seabed and then sprayed in a continuous stream back onto the coast. This strengthens the coastal dunes, which then protect the rest of the country. What makes the zandmotor so unique is that it uses the energy of ocean currents to bring the sand to the dune and the natural movement of the tides to stabilize it. This amazing system, which is based on natural processes, does, however, have certain consequences for the environment.
It dredges the sand from the ocean floor, but the ocean floor is basin-shaped. So when you pump the sand from here, the sand on the coast collapses and falls back down to the seabed. And they keep trying to put it back here. But when you keep doing that, It keeps falling.
This process is currently being used in The Hague to protect the coastline. Some 20 million cubic meters have been pumped to create the equivalent of 256 soccer fields of dunes and beaches. This project is called the Dune Delta. The sand motor technology may eventually prove to be harmful to the country and its inhabitants. By constantly having to find solutions to the problem of living in inhospitable territory, the Dutch could end up having to leave this land. Perhaps the solution for staying safe in Amsterdam actually involves living on the water instead. The latest architectural creation is these floating houses in the Ischberg district on the outskirts of Amsterdam. This suburb is composed of 7 artificial islands and houses that float.
We see it as a technical solution, which is very safe. It has the exact same comfort and aspects as a normal house. The only thing, sometimes we call it a boat because of regulations, and sometimes we call it a house of regulations. So we think about more flexible cities. How can we use the water to be responsive, to react on everything that's happening around you, to be ready for an unexpected future?
For the moment, these floating homes are among architects' preferred means of adapting to the rising water levels that are one of the biggest challenges currently facing the country. The houses are supported by floating concrete tanks immersed in the water. The rest of the construction is made of light steel and wooden panels which allow for a traditional layout inside. The houses are anchored to the bottom of the lake with steel mooring posts to stop them drifting. But here again, there is a flip side that must be taken into account. Behind this idyllic image of life on the water, these floating houses are already posing some ecological problems. As always, technological innovation disrupts ecosystems. These houses resting on concrete tanks make the water surface opaque. This lack of light causes aquatic life to die. Faced with this new problem, engineers and architects have had to propose new solutions, such as houses on stilts.
The most important thing is that if we start building on water, it's not architecture above the water, but it's architecture also underneath the water. We call this blue habitats. And if I go to a city, the first question they ask, what is the effect on the ecology, on the water system? So we build artificial corals underneath it. We bring enough water, light and air in it. And by that we can influence the system. That means that if you're in the middle of a river or the middle of a sea, we can create these buildings and they start to be as catalyst functions for creating new ecosystems around it.
But is this floating home solution enough to cope with the major upheavals awaiting the Netherlands? In 100 years, entire regions of the Netherlands will most likely be wiped off the map due to rising sea levels caused by melting glaciers combined with coastal erosion and land subsidence. The entire western facade of the country, as well as the inland areas to the south and west of Amsterdam, could be completely erased and submerged by water. Despite all their inventiveness and technicality, the Dutch may no longer be able to find land for shelter.
Living in such a vulnerable country, that means that if there's more water, more climate change, we probably have to leave our country. Because if we do nothing, if we just keep them as it is, if we don't make our levies higher, if we don't find solutions to be floating, then we will be the first to leave.
Float or leave. This is the dilemma caused by climate change that is facing the Dutch. Once again, they will have to come up with an answer, armed with their knowledge of water management.
There are extreme scenarios, and I also believe that then within the country we could do great things. If you think of our response and reconstruction after the Second World War, then a population can do a lot in a short time when the need is there.
And the Dutch are proving this to be true. Right now, a unique project on a gigantic scale is in development. The idea is to build a wall to hold back the sea. It involves a truly colossal dam that would close the North Sea in 2 places. 2 gigantic walls would have to be built in the middle of the sea. The first, some 500 kilometers long, would connect the Scottish coast with Norway. The second, 150 kilometers long, would extend from the southern tip of the UK to the coast of Brittany. This outlandish project would protect 25 million people from the risk of submersion. For the time being, this project is not the subject of a political and economic debate on a European level. It is an alarm bell being rung by Dutch scientists to raise awareness about government inaction on climate change. But once again, the impact of such a construction would be immense. This dam, on an unimaginable scale, would transform the North Sea into a freshwater lake. Such extensive modifications of an existing ecosystem would irreversibly disturb the surrounding ocean currents, including the famous Gulf Stream. It is this ocean current that ensures mild winters across Europe. Without the Gulf Stream, every country in Europe, including the Netherlands, might then experience winters like those enjoyed in Siberia.
The problem is that when you build a wall, you think you're protected. But it's always the same. You carry on expanding, creating, and building behind the wall because you think it's protecting you. And that's what risk management is about. You try to resist and protect yourself. But if the wall or the dike were to be breached, well, you can imagine the scale of the disaster that would ensue.
The risk of a technical failure is huge. One only has to imagine the amount of water that would be held back by these 2 dams. And if a breach were to occur, the flooding of the entire coastline would be a catastrophe for which no one could ever be prepared.
Now, evacuation of, let's say, the region of Rotterdam, The Hague, our capital, and Amsterdam, within 24 hours, it's impossible. Millions of people evacuate out of that area. So the evacuation plan is also to get people to higher ground. So our evacuation is more a vertical evacuation than a horizontal evacuation.
And the first region that might risk being wiped off the map is Flevoland, the suburb of Amsterdam. This immense polder, this land reclaimed from the sea, is today the area most at risk. 400,000 people live and work here, a population comparable to that of Manchester or Miami. It is absolutely necessary to ensure its safety.
It's not a technical problem, it's a societal choice that must be made. And that's the biggest problem for us now. We know that sea levels are going to rise by 2 or 3 meters, but we don't know when. We have to make the right political decisions now, which won't harm us in future. This is our duty.
The example of Flevoland, the newest and most endangered province, is leading the Dutch to change their attitudes. At a time of climate change, a new environmental consciousness is emerging, encouraging them to give up on the idea of more growth.
Today's society values the natural system and nature much more, and is hence in favor of leaving it as it is.
We have to listen to nature, we have to live with water, and we have to follow nature and then see what we can do with that. Only fight against it, that doesn't work anymore. We should understand what the water is doing, what nature is doing, and then make the best of it.
The time has come to return artificially created land to the sea. Depolderization is the new choice of the Dutch authorities to protect the country from danger. Reclaiming land, this practice that has been carried out for centuries, has, under the effect of climate change, had a negative effect. Hiding behind a dike, there is a growing awareness of the risks.
But I also think that on schools they don't teach the students enough how this country works. Because if you would talk to just somebody here on the street, they say, yes, we know we have polders and we know we live below sea level. But they don't know that it is an active system. If you're not pumping water out, we will drown.